Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming back early from the break. We really appreciate that. I'm sure more will, but thanks for dropping in to listen to this panel. I think it's a very interesting topic, and our previous speakers and that we heard this morning really teed it up nicely for us. So the nature of work will change, obviously, for sure. We don't doubt that. But our discussion will focus on how do business leaders really need to architect that hybrid workforce, which is going to consist of AI technologies, very integrated with human workers, in a very symbiotic relationship, and producing value for organizations that they're in. One thing I'd like to start out with is, what is that hybrid workforce? What are the key elements? The first one, obviously, is a very diverse human workforce. Today we have the baby boomers who are retiring. We have the Gen Xers, who I think all of us are in that segment. And now we're the millennials and Gen Zers who were born in the digital age, right? Us, I think we kind of straddled the digital, non-digital worlds. The boomers, they helped build some of the best organizations, companies the world has ever seen. So, very diverse human factor. And then we have the very mature digital component, which is, bots, RPAs, automation. Every company I've consulted with, they've automated the heck out of everything, right? But what's next is the generative AI component, which is really changing. It's a lot different in that it's really taking some of that human ingenuity, things that couldn't be done before. This is that new element that's now being added. Again, human, mature digital technologies, and now this emerging one. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with some questions.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Estes. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Information and Digital Officer for First Command. First Command is a financial wealth management advisory services firm based out of Fort Worth, Texas. We serve primarily the military audience and former military with wealth management and banking services.
And I'm Joel Rayberg, Senior Vice President and General Manager for Digital Workplace Services for Unisys. If you don't know Unisys, we have the patents for the QWERTY keyboard and invented some mainframes. And now we're in digital workplace infrastructure and cloud, as well as enterprise compute and some new technologies around quantum.
Vipul Nagrath. I'm actually transitioning. Most recent role has been Senior Vice President Head of Product Development at ADP for our largest product company. I've been doing that for 4.5 years, and 4 years prior to that, I was our global CIO.
And I'm Ruth Steinberg. I'm a principal consultant with Avasant and the Master of Products.
Great. Well, I'm going to start off with a kind of high-level question, set things on a path here. But in today's world, what do business executives, business leaders really need to focus on right now as they start architecting their future hybrid workforce? What are some of the key elements they should be focused on right now? And we'll start from with you here.
All right. When it comes to AI, specifically the new LLMs and generative AI, there's a couple of ways that we're approaching it. One is we're trying to leverage as much of the inbuilt capabilities within the platforms that we've already adopted. So we're a big Salesforce and Microsoft shop. We want to leverage as much of the capabilities and let those firms, the larger firms, invest heavily in their capabilities, and then we get to adopt them, right? It's all of the benefit without the cost. So that's one big element for us as we prepare. The other is, as we've started to look at how we want to leverage AI through various parts of our business, we realize there's a lack of data. Data obviously is the underpinning and the critical component for serving up knowledgeable results from these LLMs. And we just lacked it in a lot of our core business areas. HR for being one of them, for example. So we're re-architecting our data structures to more centrally gather all of our data collection into one place that can then serve those LLMs down the road. And then the last thing is we're encouraging the business to start proof of concepts. How do we start to engage, start to tinker, start to understand what the capabilities are, what the limitations are, so that as the technology continues to advance, we're ready to and able to leverage it quickly.
Yeah, I think I'll come at it from a provider side of it. I heard a great example a couple months ago where one of the big OEM providers for your hardware out there said that almost all of their first contracts are written through AI. And I thought about that. I was like, wow, that's super, super progressive. The impact would be large against your bottom line and some other aspects. But how will your future lawyers understand that stuff going forward if they never cut their teeth at the beginning? And I think about my industry specifically. I'm in the people business at the end of the day. Most of the work that we do requires humans to do a lot of the effort, right? We do a break, fix, repair, and some other aspects when people call in. We go out and service things, we transform businesses and the impact of that business. So when I think of this, and as I would talk to the industry side of it, I think of this on the impact of your employees. And we heard some of that today, right? One of the downfalls that we could have right here is the monotony of our jobs, doing the same repetitive tasks, doing some things that are over and over, and the people don't skill up from that aspect. I think AI, as you brought it up, Jason, I think AI has an ability to arm talent, even at the beginning level, with tools and technology that allows them to do and improve their work and gain that experience at exponential rates. And so our personal investments into that is every one of my field technicians, service desk, everybody else spends 18 hours in the next 6 months training on these tools, specifically AI, specific things on how they can elevate their career. Me, myself, my very first job was in the service desk or working help desk. And, I've evolved my career into this space. And there's people without some of the push, without the technology, without some of the things that have that ability to improve their career, but you kind of have to give them the nudge to get there. And I think that's the big thing that I see in the industry that needs to happen right now.
So let me add another layer onto this. So as a business leader, business unit leader, how do you look at what your organization does and apply each of these elements, right? The people part, the mature digital part, and then the emerging Gen AI, other artificial intelligence type technologies. How do you look at it and say, where can I apply these and extract the most value? How should they go about that?
Yeah, that's probably, whether it's just my group or anybody in the world that are looking at this right now, I think the concept of understanding the persona of the workers. What is it, the task that those folks are doing, and how to each of those stages, how is it relevant to that type of worker? And so if you understand, I'll use an example. If you understand the project manager, right? Everybody has seen Microsoft Copilot for Office 365. Well, the project manager's persona, you can easily save them hours a week or 10 hours a week possibly without sending out status reports or meeting updates or things like that. And so understanding the impact of that persona and trying to educate them with how to use the technology to best service them has that big impact. And I think you can apply that to finance, you can apply it to sales, you can apply that to marketing and every other component.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that if you're a business leader, I think there are a few things, and we've heard even today is there's excitement and there's fear. Right. So first, I think as a business leader and any leader in any part of the organization, you've got to go there and saying, okay, we've got AI, we've got Gen AI. How about let's start by debunking the myth. All right, there are a lot of myths out there. Let's debunk those. Second thing is, I think you do have to address organizational structures. And again, your role, the specific role you're in and how Gen AI is going to affect that role, it means different things to different people. And you got to get that done. Now, on the far outside of it, I think really, really, really forward business leaders, and again, all leaders for that matter, have to be looking at this from a very different perspective. We just heard from Carnival, don't think about the clients, but be like a client. Well, don't think about what AI is going to do to your business. Think about another company that doesn't have anything today that's going to use Gen AI that could completely disrupt you and everything that you do today. Completely disrupt your business. If leaders are not looking at it from that perspective, they could find themselves in at some point in time in the future in a world of hurt. All right? So I think there's some things we have to do internally. We've got to understand how it's going to affect each of our folks. Firstly, calm the troops, calm the masses. How is it going to affect our organization? What's the governance we're going to have around this? And then put that aside and let's look at it from the outside in. And if I were going to come from the outside in today and want to disrupt a business, any business that I see out there, could I use these assets? Could I use tools? Could I do tasks that Gen AI gives me today and actually be able to get there in a minute or in a year, whereas in the past it would have been, no, the barrier to entry was too high because I needed too many years or too much capital to get there.
So it sounds like perhaps this technology is so disruptive that it will be changing how organizations are structured, like down to the bones.
Yeah.
In the past, companies haven't changed all that much in terms of how they're structured, and so
it's not just structures, right? It's also you've got a very large portion of the population that's scared of this. They're scared of the ethics. They're scared of what it's going to mean. They're scared of losing their jobs. They're scared of all of these things. So while the leaders are preparing for the disruption, your kind of next down or senior leaders need to start preparing your workforce for what is kind of a freight train that's coming toward them. And they don't necessarily even know it. Particularly when you have regulated industries and you have unions and you have other areas where collective bargaining is going to have an impact on your ability to actually make some of these changes, it makes it really difficult to worry about that disruption because you have an active group of people in effect fighting. So you need to get out ahead of that and make sure that you're planning, you're working on culture, you're helping people understand and preparing for what is an inevitable future that's on us.
I do think there's something to that, in my company, our financial advisors are on the aging scale. So I think it's about a third of our financial advisors are at or near retirement age. And so we've got a big disruption coming where we've got, to train up junior advisors on folks that haven't been in the industry on how it goes and what they have to think about. And so a big emphasis for us is on documenting those processes, documenting the things that work, the things that don't, so that when you go back to look at where you want to apply AI to those processes, you've got a baseline for, not only what works, but how it works and what's involved from a human perspective.
yeah, I would think the baby boomers obviously have a lot of knowledge on how the business works, how the customers see things, how they interact, and how to extract that and pass it on, I think, is a key factor.
Yeah, the caution there is that's the way we've always done it, though, right?
Yeah, look, an interesting thing, if you think about where we are today, 3 to 4 years from now, we're going to have our first set of folks graduating college, coming into the workforce, where they had these tools, they had Gen AI built
with an AI degree
all throughout college, right? 8 to 10 years from now, you're going to have a much larger set of folks where their entire high school career and college career, they had Gen AI available to them. So they're showing up, or they're going to show up differently in the workforce than the folks that are there now.
Well, and let me add something. I mean, I'm a technologist, and so we're going to always talk about technology up here. That's all of us think about that. But think about your Uber. When you use an Uber today, and you use UberX or you use Uber Black or whatever it might be, what's the difference besides a nicer car, right? I got into a Uber Black car the other day, and they had, a lot of them typically have water bottles for you and all that stuff, but this gentleman actually put tissues in a water bottle in the tissue, and I noticed it. And so while I'm going to be anti-technologist here for a second, all of the stuff, including the new people going to it, it's still about culture. At the end of the day, we are humans, and the people relate to humans that we service, or whether it's in our companies or something else. We have to educate those newer generations, not just how to be new salespeople and financial analysts, but how do you take care of the customer in a way that they want to do service with this. And that's a big part, both from an industry side and I think from other people that are not in the service industry side, that we can't lose track of. We're so hyped about the technology. There's a massive culture side on bringing those people up we have to think about.
And it's really interesting because the kids that are coming up now through the university systems, I grew up in a very kind of strict family, and philosophy was never something we really discussed or really was a potential future for any of us. But now you've got an entire industry where ethics becomes a really important component of what we're doing, and all of a sudden that philosophy degree that everybody thought you were going to, flip burgers for the rest of your life, it's really going to be valuable and rewarded, and all of that is teaching the kids at that age how to be those humans that are in this workforce now with this hybrid model.
And you talked about the new generations coming in already well versed in AI technology, but there's a whole workforce out there now who isn't.
Yeah.
So how do we prepare our organizations to keep pace with that change? It's just accelerating so fast. How do we get change integrated in the culture and the DNA of a company so that we can live with that?
Yeah, I'll use a good example. I think you're spot on. And understanding your workforce is not just one group of people that we all like to talk about, which is the younger generation coming into it. But I'll give you, I think, a great example from a technology standpoint. When we were rolling out Microsoft Copilot, right, we took two different groups. We had one group that's here's Copilot, here's some information about you or about what you can use it for, here's your persona, here's the top things that we see about that persona, and sent them a whole bunch of information and said, go. And then we had another group that we curated. And I think understanding just from the generation and your workers, you need to think this way. Here's the people like you that are doing things like you, and your generation, here's how they're using it. And the younger generation may not be in person, they may not be taking the PowerPoints just the same, right? It might be an IM, it might be something else. But understanding that and reinforcing that on a weekly basis based on not just the job type, but the type of individuals and how they get more interaction out of it. And we took the measurement between the two. And the impact of it was huge. Just taking that extra little kind of OCM standpoint on that is big. And I think that needs to play OCM in that role, and how we evolve our ecosystem and how we work is really, really critical.
Yeah, look, one thing, there's another transformation we went through, so it's not exactly Gen AI, but a few years back, we still need skills. Like, we all have skill sets that we need. One of the things I was trying to assess as we were trying to, again, modify and change our organization, let's go test for these skills. Well, quickly realized that when you're in a global company, certain parts of the world, France, Germany, places like that, it was actually illegal to go do some of this stuff. Like, you can't do it. But we found what we could do was to test for learning agility. So not necessarily test for your specific skill set. Do you have the skill? Because if I say you don't have the skill, I can then use that as a way of, quote unquote, cutting you. And that's where the Workers' Council's got all up in arms and all. But we said, let's talk about learning agility. So we're not saying you're getting cut. We're just saying who has and who'll be at the top of that list of the agility and the ability to learn the next new thing. And I think that's highly relevant in today's world. And I think it's highly relevant as we go into Gen AI and all the things that are coming out. The tool sets, the capabilities are just going to increase at a pace that's going to be very difficult for any human to keep up with. So the more we can test and find those folks that have the learning agility and increase that learning agility in our organizations, I think the better chance we have of keeping pace with all the new innovations.
But it also breeds a concept of specialization, right? Because you don't necessarily have the ability to maintain your skills across every domain. Becoming a specialist or an expert in a certain area can be really valuable.
And then lastly, I think you have to separate those who are just using the tools versus those that are creating the tools or using the tools to create the next derivative product.
It reminds me of, so for years when I used to run development teams, I always had a unique question that I thought it was unique to me. I don't know if it's unique, but I always asked a question about what's your hobby? And I don't care what the answer is. It could be tinkering with cars. It could be learning to remodel your house. It doesn't matter. But then I asked them, how do you learn about that? How did you get into it? What did you do? How did you figure out how to do that thing and that you were that interested in it? And it was that answer that I was the most curious about. And what I turned that into was hire for curiosity. Because you can teach skills. Anybody can learn skills, right? Development skills, infrastructure, you name it. I can learn that, but I can't teach curiosity. And so one of the things that I've instilled in my teams is go find the person that may not be the best skilled, but has the most curiosity, because they're going to be the most adaptable for that next thing that ultimately puts them out of their current job.
Let me add another kind of funny story about this. All of us, I'm guessing in the room, are there's not a lot of 20-year-olds in this room. I had a conversation with my son the other day. I was like, I just don't get you. I don't understand why you can spend all of your time on your computer talking to, like when I was your age, and how many of us use that word? Not when I was your age, this is what I did. When I was your age, I would game, I would do things, I would go out and play sports, and I would ride my bike, and I said, I would talk to my friends. There was no way that I could not interact with my friends. And he looked at me with a confused face and said, Dad, I promise you I talk to my friends more than you ever did. I talk to them in the morning, I talk to them in the evening, and I talk to them all day long. It's just in a different medium. And why I use that example, because it was a light bulb moment for me in the session to think about our employees. I have about 8,000 people in my group that I think about. We have to know that there's different ways that people do different things, and we have to understand that and kind of relate to that and say it may not be exactly what we expect. It may not be, we like to make fun of them and say they all need to be rewarded and tell them how great they are constantly. But if that's the way that motivates, then we have to embrace that. And I think when we talk about the technology and the drivers, whether we gamify it or anything else, let's make sure that we're understanding that there's different types of people that get motivated and do work in a different way.
So we have a lot of technology providers, service providers here as our guests and participating, Unisys, obviously. Do you see a role for these companies to actually implement and support new technologies to help manage all of this? How you deploy Gen AI, how you deploy regular digital technologies. It's getting more complex, so it seems there could be a role in companies like yourselves to help with this rollout.
Yeah, I talk about things in the failed promise of digital workplace, and I'll talk specifically about that, because if we think about 15 years ago, computers were going to heal themselves. You were never going to have to fix a computer. We think about 5 years ago, well, we were going to replace most of the service desk with a chatbot, and that was going to take care of all your problems. But if any of you ever dealt with a chatbot, it didn't really live up to its hype. Even in the Gen AI aspect of things, we all are talking about the possibility. We're all talking about the vision of where we get to. Notice there's not a lot of specific examples that are fundamentally changing outside of the image creation and language models that bring to it. However, I do think in Unisys, and specifically in my group, the low-hanging fruit is that. And so the low-hanging fruit are bringing technologies to implement a chatbot, what actually saves people time. And it's really important here to understand that. How can I make our customers more productive, and the impact of the end users give them value back to the organizations? So we're looking at, how many of you do self-service passwords right now? Just about everybody, right? Did that save you? Does that save your individual employees time versus when they used to call it the service desk and say, can you change my password? Absolutely not. We didn't do any value creation. So we need to think about everything that we're doing. We're doing this with chatbot and knowledge-based creation and that first level tool, or the first level enhancements to that level one person, to think about that aspect of how can I get that individual off the call as fast as possible with the solution without routing them somewhere else? How do I not go through your normal phone decision tree of what department, what group, what to get to? How do I get the problem stated in the first sentence or the first chat and answer that right then? And that's more possible now than it ever has been before. And so, it's my mission to not talk about the failed promise, but actually we delivered upon the promise of DWS.
So turning to another topic, which I think is probably the most interesting of this that we've had so far, is does the work of HR, human resources, human capital, does it need to change as this synergy between AI and humans starts to change the workplace down, at a core level? So are there new incentive packages for the bots and the AI itself? Like, how do you incentivize them, perhaps? I don't know. What do you all think about that?
I think, it's already changing the HR landscape in our office. I did a proof of concept for our HR team a couple weeks back now. where I had them input their job description and a handful of the resumes that were submitted, and asked the chatbot to evaluate the resumes against the job description. Give me a 1 to 10 scale, and then tell me all the reasons why or why not it was a match. We did it against a set of resumes that we had already interviewed. So I already knew what the outcome of the interviews were. And the chatbot absolutely nailed the description. It nailed the questions that we should ask during the interview. It nailed the flaws in the resume it saw against the job description. And it sped up the processing time of looking at 10 different resumes to seconds, right, to evaluate for that first phase evaluation. So I think that's one aspect that there's already impact that we're seeing. The other is I can't wait to point it at my O365 and never have to do a performance evaluation again, right? We imagine that your AI model is looking at the sentiment of all emails flowing across your organization so that you no longer have to survey your entire workforce to see if they're engaged or not, but you can tell based on the tone of voice that's being used in the emails that they're sending, or the quality of the data they're using in the presentations in their PowerPoints. That's stuff that will be low-hanging fruit, I think, here in the very near future.
Well, what's in care, right? And especially sitting here in California, Illinois, New York, there's a bunch of states that are making this stuff illegal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, especially on the resume side. In fact, when you're a candidate and you apply for a job in a number of states in the U.S. already, and it might become a federal thing, you can opt out and saying, no, I do not want a bot to review my resume. They're allowed, an employee or a candidate is allowed to opt out of that, right? So I think we're also going to go through a major shift and major time of a lot of flux, right? Where you're going to have to do both. Like here's capabilities that you could help you, but you're going to have to understand the regulatory space and saying what things are you doing legally or illegally. And I think at the end of the day, that comes back to our legal teams and our HR teams, human capital management, managing all that within our companies. It's actually, I think, for a while, going to become even harder.
And I think that the ability to do screening, for example, that can be mechanized in some way or another. That's actually been something that's been on the forefront for a long time, right? We've ingested resumes, we've scanned them, we've done all these things. But when you get to the interview part, are you going to fit in the organization? Which is a little bit different when you're talking about grades 5 to 1, but when you go from 6 to grade 20, whatever that happens to be, that actually is substantially more important than what your key skills are. You're going to have to figure out how to make that work, and if you have a job where, I don't know if I want to have it on, if that borderline job, is it more important that I have the skills or more important that I have the business acumen and the ability to assimilate into the organization? I mean, that gets to be a lot harder, and I don't think we're just there yet, figuring out how to do that.
Well, and Jason, you can ask Copilot that right now. I did it and had my team do it and said, look at my last 30 days of email and the transcripts from all my teams and tell me what are my qualities as a leader are.
I don't.
You want to feel good about yourself?
My CISO just won't let me yet.
Ironically, this is the bad part. Almost all of I had my leaders do the same thing because it was kind of a fun experiment, and it's about the same thing for everybody, unfortunately. And I think again, that's the human element that we're going to lose past that, right? Yeah.
In addition, you get all the people saying, "You're reading my emails?" Right? That's the whole fear. I mean, that's the big brother concern that everybody has about AI, right? If I've got Copilot on my Teams, what should I no longer be saying on Teams to my colleague? I'm frustrated. I don't like this guy. Whatever it is, it gets to be a lot for an employee to sit back and say, what should I be saying, and how does that change my culture? How do I stay connected when half of us are remote 50% of the time, and you're not walking the halls and figuring out how to connect with people when you can't really be honest because you're worried about the tech.
And as managers, we're going to be managing people, we're going to be managing bots, we're going to be managing artificial intelligence. That's a lot to take on if you really think about it. Managing artificial intelligence within an organization, something new that's never,
No raises for the bots.
So we have a few more minutes. I'd like to ask each of you if you could give, some parting thoughts. Again, looking at those 3 layers, how do we tackle optimizing those three: people, mature technologies, and these emerging ones, all at once together to maximize value for the organization?
Okay. I think the answer has to be you can't single thread any of this. It all has to be multi-threaded. So as you're innovating, as you're using the technologies, as you're getting really good at figuring out how to innovate and generate revenue with new tech, you've really got to be focused on the people also, because they are still scared. And figuring out how to help them through that, I think, is going to mean less disruption to your organization as you start to, in effect, implement some of these technologies, which may have job implications.
Yeah, so I think it's an and, not an or. And by the and is the combination of the humans and the technology.
Right.
It's not an or. It's not humans or technology. It's an and. It's that combination of those two things that come together. If we look at where we actually are today, and again, I talk about debunking some of that myth. Even today, where is Gen AI or all these other AI capabilities getting us is still task-based. Okay, we talk about the future, the promise, where will they actually start thinking? Will it actually get to some more greater creativity? And we see little inklings of that right now, but the reality is it's still the real creativity is coming from the humans, and the Gen AI is the tool. Right? One analogy I use is we had lumberjacks 100 years ago, and we have lumberjacks today. The process of dropping a tree, taking a tree down, hasn't changed. The tool has. We're not using a handsaw, and you need two people to do it. You can use a chainsaw and do it much faster. So it's a power tool. So at least where we are today, Gen AI is that power tool. And the power tools will get better, and it's not a perfect analogy because these power tools will change. So I'm very actually excited about the future, not fearful about it. And I think the combination that comes when you have, it's the humans with the technology, it's the and, not the or.
Yeah, and I would say, as we think about how our workforce is going to evolve, don't boil the ocean, right? Try to find the 2 or 3 possible implications of technology and how it can be embraced within the organization. Specifically, do the shadowing. Find out where are their pain points, what's the repetitive parts at the very first level, right? Because as soon as you go back to them and say, what if you only had to do one of those a day instead of 40 of the same thing over and over? Because that's not exciting. What if I armed you with more information that allows you to solve the tougher problems so you can make that person happy on the other end of the phone, or you can transform that business in a different way? And on that line, I think it's about experience at the end of the day, right? We as a provider, we deal in the workplace experience. We're trying to improve everybody's experience with the technology itself. But transform that to how are they experiencing their job role within your organization, and how can you improve that experience and their worth and value in that specific role, and how do you elevate them with the potential of moving up or being the best that they do in their existing job for 10 years. Both are equally okay, but how are you embracing kind of that self-desire that they have anyway?
Yeah, I think my perspective would be, the change is coming. I think it's inevitable. What the impact of the change will be is the yet to be seen. I mean, in our organization, the groups that are already utilizing AI capabilities are seeing 30% improvement.
Mm-hmm.
They're 30% smarter and 30% faster than they used to be. We just increased our marketing budget by 25% year over year, and none of that went to people because they're utilizing AI technologies to be faster and smarter and more efficient. Mm-hmm. So the change is coming. I think the change will hit development organizations. I think it'll hit infrastructure organizations. I think you'll see more low-code and no-code solutions because Gen AI will be able to create some of that on the back end instead of just helping it now. Today it's a really fast Google. Tomorrow it's actually your really fast developer. So I do think the change is coming, and preparing your organization to be on the front end of it, to upskill them into that now and get them curious about the technology and not afraid of it. I think that's an important element.
And we have some CIOs and leaders in IT. What do you think the role is going to be for CIOs in this process? Are they going to be leading the charge with the business, or are they going to be, how do you see that?
I very much think so, yes. I mean, again, we're talking about technology totally getting infused into the fabric of the company completely. So if you don't have strong technology leadership at the helm, guiding and educating and helping the rest of your organization, then you've got a problem. So I think absolutely it'll be at the forefront.
I think, again, going back in the history lesson, let's think about where CIOs were 15 years ago. They were the keeper of all keys, right? You wanted a new ERP system. CIO had told you which one to use. CIO was in charge of the networks and the data center, all of these things. If you wanted technology, it went through the CIO. Where are we now? We're in a different world, right? We don't own that because we use SaaS applications. We've outsourced our data center to the cloud. Most of the time, we're a cost part of the organization. How do we get our product out at the cheapest cost at the end of the day? My mission at Unisys is how do I give value back to the CIO so that they're not talking about their costs, but they're talking about the value gained because of the efforts of their employees have changed, right? They're bringing technologies that have increased productivity at a different level. And that's what I would encourage every CIO to talk about with their CEO and at the board meetings, because what are you doing to your organization to increase that productivity and measure it? That's the key part. So you can walk in and say, yes, I cost you, $1 billion worth of IT costs because IT is expensive, but I also brought back to the organization 1.3 billion worth of productivity gains from the works that we did here. And I think that's the big transition that will happen. The good ones will figure that part out, and I think CIOs will have a bigger role to play even in the future than they do right now.
The hardest part is the waiting. Waiting on the mergers and acquisition, the consolidation to happen, waiting on the regulatory environment to catch up and figure out where it's going to land. That's the hard part, because investing too much right now in it is, could be detrimental. So you got a measured pace.
All right, well, we've reached the end of our time on some good notes there. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom here today. That's it, we're done.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you all.
Thank you.